Let's look at viewport navigation, or changing our point of view in 3D space, so that we have something interesting to look at instead of just a sphere or a cube. Let's create one of the stock 3ds Max plants. We can go into the Create panel in the Geometry section, and from the pull-down list that's labeled Standard Primitives, we can click on that and go to AEC Extended. That stands for Architecture, Engineering, and Construction. In that category, we've got Foliage. To create a plant, we'll click on the Foliage button and then select the plant from this list here. I'll scroll down and let's go for Society Garlic. Click on that and then just click near the center of the perspective view at the origin there. Now I've got a garlic plant. Right-click in the viewport to exit that creation mode. And then if I deselect the object, you'll notice that it degrades into this so-called canopy view. Let's change that so we can see the foliage better. I'll reselect it. Go up to the Modify panel. And down here, you'll see something that says Viewport Canopy Mode. Let's choose Never. And that way, we will see the plant better no matter what. We've also got these selection brackets here, and also the blue or cyan selection highlighting. We don't actually need both of those. Let's turn off the selection brackets with the J key on the keyboard. Now we've got something interesting to look at. Let's learn about the different ways to manipulate our viewpoint in 3D. The three main things you'll want to do are dolly forward and back, position the camera side to side or up and down, or orbit or tumble around the scene. To move the camera forward and back, use the magnifier glass. Click on that, and then click anywhere in the viewport, and you can position your camera forward and back. That's known as dolly. The icon is actually labeled zoom, which is technically something else. Zooming is changing the focal length or the angle of view. Here, in fact, we're actually positioning the camera forward and back. So we can do that in any view. You can dolly forward in the top, left, or front views as well. Let me deselect that object just so that we're not seeing that selection highlighting. Just select the Select Object tool and then click off the object. Next, we can position the camera up and down and side to side, and that's the hand button here. And it's also kind of a misnomer. It's labeled as pan. What we're doing here is not actually panning. We're positioning the camera side to side and up and down. Side to side movement is a truck or track. Up and down movement is pedestal. Pan is actually something else when the camera sits in one place and rotates around its own axis to do a panorama. Then we've got the Orbit tool, and that allows us to spin around the center of the world. And here we go, Orbit. It's also sometimes known as tumble or arc rotate. It works best in the perspective view. And when you activate the Orbit tool, you will get this yellow circle. If you click in the center of that yellow circle, then you can tumble or orbit around the scene. If you click on the outside of that circle, what'll happen is the camera will tilt relative to its own line of sight. That's known as a Dutch tilt or a canted angle, and the horizon line is no longer level. That's not something that you want to do accidentally. It's something that you really need to do only intentionally. So we want to restore our camera back to a level horizon line. And you might think that you could just use the undo button to do that. We've got an undo button here on the main toolbar, and actually a redundant undo up here on the caption bar. If I click undo here, you'll notice that it didn't undo the viewport rotation. It undid my selection. When I clicked undo, it actually reselected the plant. And if I keep undoing here, it's actually going to go back through the history of scene commands. If I keep doing that, we'll go back eventually to the point before we change that canopy setting. All right, I'm going to redo. And if we want to undo a viewport command, then there's actually a separate undo buffer for viewports. We can find that in each of the viewport panels. And this one's the perspective view. I can click on the name of that panel, in this case perspective, and go to undo whatever. Here it says undo view rotate. And I can click on that. And now the undo has been committed. Okay, so there's a keyboard shortcut for that if you get into trouble. So undo, just normal undo is up here. And then if you do, for example, a viewport command that you want to undo, you can hit Shift-Z. And if you want to undo a scene command, it's actually Control-Z. So that is the Orbit tool, also known as Arc Rotate. I'll reset my canopy here back to never. And as I mentioned, the Orbit tool works best in the perspective view. If we do an orbit in one of these orthographic views, what's going to happen is we're going to pretty easily get lost. This is actually converting the view into something called an axonometric projection. And go up here to the top view and select there and click in the center. And that's probably a good illustration of what an axonometric projection is. It's a 3D view in which the grid lines never converge at a vanishing point. But again, that's something that you would only want to invoke intentionally, not accidentally. I want to restore all these views back to their defaults, and I can just use Shift-Z to do that. Go over here and click in the view, Shift-Z a few times, and restore those views back to their defaults. That's a quick intro to viewport navigation in 3ds Max.